The coffee in the police station tasted like desperation. I remember sitting across from Detective Thompson, my hands trembling in my lap, while my parents formed a literal human shield around my younger sister, Chloe. Her mascara had run, creating dark rivers down her perfect cheeks, and somehow, even in her devastation, she still looked beautiful. My mother was stroking her hair, whispering comforting words I'd never once heard directed at me. "Someone needs to take responsibility for this," Detective Thompson said, his gaze flicking between us. "The evidence points to one of you being behind the wheel during the hit and run. Mrs. Albright is in critical condition." My father, George, stepped forward. His face was a mask I knew well, the one he wore when making business decisions, weighing costs and benefits with cold precision. "Officer, my daughters are here to cooperate fully. We just need a moment to discuss this as a family." They ushered us into a small side room, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. Chloe collapsed into a chair, sobbing into her hands. My mom immediately went to her, cradling her as if she were still 5 years old instead of 23. Then Dad turned to me, his expression burned into my memory. "Sarah, we need you to tell them you were driving." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "No. Chloe was driving. I wasn't even in the car." "Your sister has her whole life ahead of her," Mom said, not even looking at me. "She just got accepted to graduate school. She has David, who wants to marry her. She's going to do something important with her life." The implication hung in the air like poison gas. "Unlike you. I'd heard it my entire life, in 1,000 different ways. This is insane. I wasn't there. The truth will come out." I looked at Chloe, waiting for her to speak up, to tell them this was crazy. She just cried harder. Dad's voice dropped, taking on the tone he used when closing difficult deals. "You're 28 years old, Sarah. You work at a grocery store. You live in a studio apartment. You've never done anything remarkable with your opportunities. Chloe wouldn't survive prison," Mom added, finally meeting my eyes. "Look at her. She's delicate. She's sensitive. But you're stronger. You've always been the tough one." "The ugly one, you mean," I heard myself say, the words escaping before I could stop them. It was the unspoken truth that had shaped every family interaction for as long as I could remember. Mom's face flushed, but she didn't deny it. "You're being dramatic. This is about practicality. Chloe has opportunities you'll never have. Why should we waste 2 futures when we only have to waste one?" Something crystallized inside me in that moment, hard, cold, and absolutely clear. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me and saw a stranger. Someone who had made a calculation and found me worth less than nothing. "Do your duty as the older sister," Dad said. "For once in your life, be useful to this family." I walked out of that room without another word. I found Detective Thompson and told him everything. Chloe had called me that night, hysterical, begging me to come to the police station for support. She'd been driving while intoxicated, hit Mrs. Albright in a crosswalk, and panicked. Our parents had arrived before me, already formulating their plan. The look on my mother's face when I gave my statement has fueled me through everything that came after. My hands shook as I answered Detective Thompson's questions. He was patient, methodical, writing everything down in careful detail. Through the glass of the interview room, I could see my parents' faces contorted with rage. Dad was pacing like a caged animal. Mom had her arm around Chloe, who'd collapsed, no longer crying, but staring at me with pure hatred. "Let me make sure I understand," Detective Thompson said, reviewing his notes. Your sister called you at approximately 11:47 p.m., asking you to meet her at this station. She didn't explain why over the phone. She just kept saying she needed me, that something terrible had happened. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the stuffy room. I thought maybe she'd been attacked or robbed. She sounded terrified. And when you arrived, my parents were already here. They pulled Chloe into a private room. When I walked in, Dad immediately started explaining their plan. The memory made my stomach turn. They'd already decided everything. They just needed me to agree. Detective Thompson set down his pen, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Ms. Sarah, what you're doing takes courage. Family cases are always the hardest. They're not my family anymore, I heard myself say. The words felt true as soon as they left my mouth. The detective excused himself to confer with his colleagues. I sat alone in that room for nearly an hour, watching the clock tick forward while my old life died second by second. Through the glass, I saw my parents gesturing angrily, Dad's face red with fury. A uniformed officer stood between them and the interview room door, clearly there to prevent them from bursting in. When Detective Thompson returned, he had another officer with him, a woman with kind eyes who introduced herself as Sergeant Elena Rodriguez. She sat down across from me with a gentle smile. We're going to need you to give a formal statement, she explained. Everything you remember from the phone call, the timeline, what your parents said to you. Can you do that? I nodded. My throat felt tight, but my resolve was crystallizing into something harder than diamond. They'd made their choice about who I was. Now I was making mine. The formal statement took another 2 hours. They asked me to repeat details multiple times, probing for inconsistencies. I understood what they were doing, verifying that I was telling the truth, that this wasn't some vindictive fabrication born of sibling rivalry. Had there been any recent conflicts between you and your sister? Sergeant Rodriguez asked. There's always been conflict, I admitted. But not fighting exactly. More like she existed in the sun, and I existed in her shadow. That was just how our family worked. Can you elaborate? I took a breath, trying to find words for dynamics that had always simply been. Chloe was the pretty one, the smart one, the one with potential. I was just there. My parents made that clear in 1,000 small ways. Better clothes for her, nicer birthday parties, more attention to her problems. I learned to be invisible. That must have been painful. It was normal, I said. At least, I thought it was. Maybe every family has a scapegoat and a golden child. I just happened to be born into the wrong role. Sergeant Rodriguez exchanged a look with Detective Thompson that I couldn't interpret. She made a few more notes before continuing. And tonight, when they asked you to take responsibility for your sister's crime, was that the first time they'd asked you to sacrifice something for her? The question opened a door I hadn't expected. Memories flooded through, sharp and painful despite their age. I was 15 when I got my first job, I said slowly, bagging groceries at the supermarket downtown. I saved every dollar for almost a year because I wanted to go on the school trip to Boston. It cost $800. Did you go? Chloe's car broke down 2 weeks before the trip. She was 17, had just gotten her license. Dad said the family couldn't afford both the repair and my trip. He took my savings to fix her car. The old hurt felt distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. Chloe went to prom in that car. I watched the school trip photos on social media. Did your parents pay you back? They said I was being selfish for asking. That family means sacrifice. I told them about the college fund that had existed for both of us until Chloe decided she wanted to go to an expensive private university. My fund had been absorbed into hers. I'd been told community college was perfectly adequate for someone with my grades. I told them about the time I'd won a regional art competition in high school, the only thing I'd ever been genuinely good at. My parents had missed the award ceremony because it conflicted with Chloe's volleyball game. When I came home with my ribbon, a $50 prize, Mom had barely looked up from cooking dinner. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she'd said absently. Asterisk, can you set the table? We're eating early because Chloe has practice. Asterisk, the ribbon had gone into a drawer. Chloe's volleyball trophies lined the mantel. "Why didn't you leave?" Sergeant Rodriguez asked. "Once you were 18, you could have walked away." Where would I go? The question sounded naive even to my own ears. I had no money, no car, no support system. And there was a part of me that kept thinking if I just tried harder, did better, proved myself somehow, they'd finally see me. And tonight, I finally understood they'll never see me. Not the way I needed them to. I met her eyes directly. They looked at me and saw someone disposable. So, I'm disposing of them instead. After I finished my statement, they asked me to wait while they interviewed my sister. I sat in a different room, drinking terrible coffee from a vending machine and watching the minutes crawl by on the wall clock. It was past 3 in the morning. A victim advocate, whose name I didn't catch, came to check on me. She was young, maybe just a few years older than me, with tired eyes that suggested she'd seen too much. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight?" she asked. The question hadn't occurred to me. "I have my apartment." "Will your parents know where to find you?" Of course they would. They'd come there, full of rage and recrimination. The thought made me feel ill. "I can connect you with resources," the advocate offered. "Temporary housing, counseling services. What you're going through. It's a form of family trauma." I accepted her card but knew I wouldn't call. I handled this the way I handled everything, alone, quietly, without asking for help that might not come. Detective Thompson found me around 4:30 in the morning. He looked exhausted but satisfied. "Your sister has confessed." The evidence was overwhelming. Traffic camera footage, paint transfer on her vehicle, her own blood alcohol test from tonight. Her story kept changing, but eventually, she admitted to everything. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I felt dizzy. What happens now? She'll be formally charged. Given the severity, driving while intoxicated, hit and run, fleeing the scene of an injury accident, she's looking at significant prison time. Your testimony will be crucial at trial. I'll be there, I promised. Whatever you need. He studied me for a moment. Your parents are still in the building. We can escort you out through a back entrance if you prefer to avoid them. I considered this, then shook my head. I'll walk out the front. I'm not hiding anymore. They were waiting in the lobby. Dad standing with his arms crossed while Mom sat in a plastic chair, looking hollowed out. Chloe was nowhere to be seen, likely already processed and held pending arraignment. Dad's eyes locked onto me with an intensity that would have terrified my younger self. "You've destroyed this family. You destroyed it yourself when you decided one daughter was worth more than the other," I replied calmly. I just refused to go along with it. Mom finally looked up, her face aged a decade in one night. "She's your sister. How can you do this to her? She's a drunk driver who left someone severely injured in the street. How can you defend her? Were you even there?" Mom's voice cracked. "After everything we've done for you, like what?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended. Fed me? Gave me a room? That's the bare minimum of parental responsibility, not some debt I owe you. Dad stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. You walk out that door, you're dead to us. No more family, no more support. You'll have nothing. I smiled, and I could tell the expression unsettled him. I already have nothing from you. At least now I'm free. I walked past them into the early morning darkness. The sky was just beginning to lighten at the edges, that deep blue that comes before dawn. My car sat alone in the parking lot, and I drove home through empty streets, feeling lighter than I had in years. The next few weeks were a blur of court appearances, paperwork, and increasingly hostile messages from my parents. They hired a lawyer who tried to discredit my testimony, painting me as a jealous, vindictive sister who'd fabricated evidence out of spite. The traffic camera footage made that narrative impossible, but they tried anyway. Mrs. Albright's family reached out through the prosecutor's office, asking if they could meet me. I agreed, terrified of facing the woman whose life my sister had nearly ended. Mrs. Albright was in a wheelchair when I met her daughter, Laura, pushing her into the victim services office, where we'd arranged to talk. She was smaller than I'd imagined, with silver hair and hands that trembled slightly, but her eyes were sharp and kind. You're Sarah, she said, studying my face. You look like you haven't slept in weeks. Neither do you, I responded, then immediately regretted my bluntness. But she laughed, a sound like rustling leaves. I like honesty. Sit down, dear. Let's talk. We spent 2 hours together. She told me about the accident from her perspective, crossing the street after her book club meeting, the sudden impact, waking up in the hospital unable to move her legs, the months of physical therapy, the financial devastation, the nightmares that still woke her at 3 a.m. I'm so sorry, I kept saying, as if I could somehow apologize on behalf of my sister's actions. You didn't do this, Mrs. Albright said firmly. And according to the police, you're the only one in your family who tried to make it right. Your parents actually approached my daughter. Did you know that? I felt my blood run cold. What? Laura pulled out her phone, showing me a saved voicemail. My father's voice filled the small room. Asterisk Mrs. Albright, this is George Miller. I'm calling to discuss a settlement. My daughter made a terrible mistake, but she's young and has her whole future ahead of her. I'm prepared to offer substantial compensation if you'd be willing to speak to the prosecutor about reducing the charges. Asterisk, he tried to buy her silence. I shouldn't have been surprised, but somehow I still was. I told him to go to hell, Laura said flatly. Your sister nearly killed my mother and drove away. No amount of money changes that. Mrs. Albright reached across and took my hand with her trembling one. But you told the truth. In a family that clearly values image over integrity, you chose to do the right thing. That takes a kind of courage most people never need to find. Her words stayed with me through the trial, through watching my sister sentenced to 4 years, through my parents' final vicious message telling me I was no longer their daughter. Chloe was convicted and sentenced to 4 years. Mom and Dad hired the best lawyers money could buy, but the evidence was overwhelming. Traffic cameras, paint samples, witness testimony from a jogger who'd seen the whole thing. My sister's blood alcohol content had been nearly twice the legal limit. I packed up my studio apartment the day after the sentencing. My phone had been ringing constantly with calls from my parents, which I sent straight to voicemail. The messages grew progressively more hostile as they realized I wasn't going to answer. The first one from Mom was almost conciliatory. Asterisk Sarah, we need to talk about this. You've made your point. Asterisk by the fifth. Her true feelings emerged. Asterisk you've destroyed your sister's life out of spite. I always knew you were jealous of her, but I never thought you'd be this vindictive. Asterisk Dad's messages focused on practicality. Asterisk what Chloe did was wrong, but your stubbornness has cost this family hundreds of thousands in legal fees. Your sister's future is ruined. I hope you can live with that. Asterisk I could. I slept better than I had in years. I moved to Denver, 3 states away from my family in Illinois. I enrolled in community college using the money I'd saved working double shifts at the grocery store. The plan had always been there, buried under years of their low expectations and my own defeated acceptance. Now nothing held me back. My academic advisor, Dr. Evelyn Reed, became the first person who ever saw potential in me. She reviewed my placement tests with growing interest. Have you considered majoring in computer science? These analytical scores are exceptional. I barely graduated high school, I admitted. My family always said I wasn't college material. Dr. Reed removed her glasses, studying me with sharp brown eyes. Your family was wrong. I've been doing this for 30 years. You have aptitude. Those words changed everything. I threw myself into my coursework with obsessive focus. Programming languages made sense to me in a way nothing else ever had. There were rules, logic, problems with clear solutions. Work produced results. Effort mattered. The first semester was brutal. I'd been out of school for 10 years, and my study skills were nearly non-existent. Everything my classmates seemed to know instinctively: how to take notes, how to prepare for exams, how to manage multiple deadlines, I had to learn through trial and error. I failed my first programming midterm. I sat in my car afterward and cried for 20 minutes, convinced my parents had been right about me all along. Then I dried my eyes, went to Dr. Reed's office hours, and asked for help. She didn't sugarcoat it. You're behind. Your fundamentals are weak. But you're also one of the most determined students I've encountered. Determination can overcome a lot. She connected me with a tutor, a graduate student named Ethan, who had infinite patience for my stupid questions. We met 3 times a week in the library, working through problems until the concepts clicked. Slowly, painfully, I started to understand. The second midterm, I got a B. The final exam, an A. Ethan high-fived me when grades posted. You know what the difference was? You stopped being afraid of being wrong. You just kept trying until you got it right. His observation hit deeper than he knew. I'd spent my entire life afraid of being wrong because being wrong meant proving my parents right about me. But here, in this new life I was building, being wrong just meant I hadn't learned something yet. There was no shame in it, just opportunity. I took 5 classes the next semester, working 30 hours a week at a tech startup to pay my bills. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I lived on instant ramen and coffee, studying in every spare moment between shifts and classes. Daniel Kim, the owner, noticed my dedication. He'd started the company in his garage 5 years earlier and built it through sheer stubborn determination, a path I recognized in myself. You're going to burn out if you keep this pace, he warned me one evening when he found me debugging code at midnight. I can't afford to slow down, I said simply. I'm making up for lost time. Lost time from what? I told him an abbreviated version of my story. The family that had written me off, the sister in prison, the choice that had cost me everything and given me everything simultaneously. Daniel listened without interrupting, his expression growing thoughtful. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and nodded once. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, he said. Traditional, prestigious, respectable. I dropped out of medical school to code in my garage. They didn't speak to me for 3 years. Did they come around eventually? Eventually. But by then, I'd realized I didn't need their approval anymore. He gestured around the office at the company he'd built. This is mine. They can accept it or not. Either way, it exists. That conversation shifted something in how I viewed my own journey. I'd been running from my family's judgment, trying to prove them wrong. Daniel showed me a different possibility, building something so undeniably real that their opinions became irrelevant. Within a year, I transferred to Denver State University with a full scholarship. I worked part-time at Daniel's tech startup, debugging code and learning everything I could absorb. He saw the same thing Dr. Reed had seen. "You're wasted doing grunt work," he told me after I'd solved a problem that had stumped their senior developers for weeks. "I'm moving you to the development team." The development team consisted of 6 people, all of whom had computer science degrees from prestigious universities. I was the only community college transfer, the only one who'd started coding after age 25. The only woman. My new supervisor, a guy named Jake, made his skepticism clear from day one. "Daniel likes to give people chances," he said during my first team meeting. "But this is professional level work. If you can't keep up, speak up before you drag down the whole team." I kept my mouth shut and my head down, letting my work speak for itself. When Jake assigned me what he clearly thought was a grunt task, documenting legacy code that nobody wanted to touch, I found 3 critical security vulnerabilities hidden in the ancient functions. Daniel called an emergency meeting when I submitted my report. The vulnerabilities could have cost the company everything if exploited by the wrong people. I'd not only found them but proposed elegant solutions that would patch the holes without breaking existing functionality. Jake's face when Daniel praised my work in front of the whole company was almost worth the sleepless nights I'd spent combing through that code. "Good catch," Jake muttered afterward, unable to quite meet my eyes. "Just doing my job," I replied evenly. But something had shifted. The other developers started coming to me with questions, asking my opinion on design decisions, including me in the casual conversations that happened around the coffee machine. I was becoming part of the team, earning respect, one problem solved at a time. My social life, such as it was, consisted mainly of study groups and work colleagues. I'd learned to be alone in my family, and that skill translated well to my new independence. But there was a difference between chosen solitude and enforced isolation. Emily from my database management class invited me to a party at her apartment. I almost declined. Parties had never been my thing, but something made me accept. The gathering was small, maybe 15 people, mostly other computer science students. They talked about code and theory and argued good-naturedly about the best programming languages. For the first time in my life, I was in a room where I understood the conversation, where I could contribute meaningfully. "You're the one who found those security vulnerabilities at Daniel's company, right?" asked a guy named Ryan. "I heard about that through the internship network." Pretty impressive. People were talking about my work, impressed by something I'd done. The novelty of it made me almost giddy. I started accepting more invitations. Coffee with Emily, lunch with Ethan, happy hours with the development team. Building a social network from scratch was awkward and uncomfortable, but it was also mine, based on who I actually was, not who I was supposed to be. Eleanor, my neighbor, became an unexpected friend. She reminded me of what a mother could be: interested, supportive, critical when necessary, but always kind. She taught me to cook real food, not just ramen and frozen dinners. "You're too thin," she declared, showing up at my door one Saturday with bags of groceries. "Come on, I'm teaching you to make lasagna. Her kitchen was warm and cluttered with the accumulation of a long life. Photos of children and grandchildren covered the refrigerator. Plants thrived on every windowsill. She moved through the space with comfortable familiarity, pulling out pans and ingredients while explaining each step. Cooking is chemistry, she said. You understand code. You can understand this. She was right. Following a recipe was like following an algorithm. Precise measurements, specific steps, predictable outcomes. I threw myself into learning with the same intensity one brought to everything else. My granddaughter went to college for computer science, Eleanor mentioned while we waited for the lasagna to bake. She's doing very well. Works at some big company in Silicon Valley. Are you close with her? Eleanor's expression flickered with something sad. Not as close as I'd like. She's busy. I'm old. That's life. You're not old. You're teaching me to make lasagna. She laughed and patted my hand. You're good for my ego, Sarah. I'm glad you moved in next door. The comment touched something raw in me. Someone was glad I existed in their space. Such a simple thing, but I'd never had it before. The lasagna turned out perfectly. Eleanor sent me home with half of it, and a promise that next week we'd tackle bread from scratch. My parents called a few times during the first year. I changed my number, but they somehow kept tracking down my new contact information. I never answered, letting their increasingly hostile voicemails pile up before deleting them in batches. Then, about 18 months after I'd moved to Denver, Mom managed to catch me during a moment of weakness. I'd just finished a brutal exam and wasn't paying attention when I answered an unknown number. Her voice, on the other end, was tight with anger. Chloe writes to us about how terrible prison is. She cries every day. She's having panic attacks. The other inmates are cruel to her. And you're out there living your life like nothing happened. She hit someone with her car and left them severely injured in the street, I said calmly. Mrs. Albright spent 3 months in the hospital. She still can't walk without assistance. But please, tell me more about how hard prison is for Chloe. You could have prevented all of this. Mom's voice cracked. One small sacrifice. That's all we asked. You asked me to go to prison for a crime I didn't commit. You told me I was trash and ugly and worthless compared to her. You wanted me to throw away my life because you decided hers was worth more. I kept my voice steady, clinical. So I made a choice too. I chose myself. You're not the daughter I raised. Good. Your daughter was miserable. I hung up and blocked the number. That was 2 years ago, and I haven't spoken to them since. Last month, I got a message on LinkedIn from someone named David Fitzgerald. The name was familiar, but I couldn't immediately place it. Then I remembered David, Chloe's fiancé, the one she'd supposedly been planning a future with. His message was brief. I hope this reaches you. I know we've never met. I wanted you to know that I ended my engagement to your sister about 6 months after her conviction. Your parents told her you'd been spreading lies about what happened that night, that you'd sabotaged her out of jealousy. I want you to know I never believed them. I contacted Mrs. Albright's family and heard the truth. I'm sorry for what you went through. You did the right thing. I stared at that message for a long time. The vindication felt distant, like something happening to someone else. I'd stopped needing their validation years ago, but I responded anyway. Thank you for reaching out. I hope you're well. His reply came an hour later. I married someone else last year. She's a public defender. Works with people the system failed. Meeting her helped me understand why you made the choice you did. Some things matter more than family loyalty, Asterisk, I smiled at that. Some stranger's husband understood me better than my own parents ever had. The years in Denver transformed me in ways I'm still discovering. That initial struggle through community college led to my transfer to Denver State, where I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer science. The girl who'd barely graduated high school finished university with a 3.9 GPA and job offers from 3 different companies. I chose to stay with Daniel. Loyalty mattered to me, and he'd given me a chance when I was nobody. 2 years after graduation, I was promoted to lead developer at Daniel's company, which had grown from a scrappy startup to a legitimate competitor in the cybersecurity field. My salary was now 6 figures. I purchased a small house in a quiet neighborhood with a garden I was learning to cultivate. Tomatoes, apparently, were harder to grow than code. My neighbor, Eleanor, was a retired teacher who brought me cuttings from her flower garden and taught me about composting. She knew nothing about my family, nothing about Chloe or prison or the choice I'd made. To her, I was just Sarah, the quiet young woman next door who sometimes needed help identifying weeds. You have good instincts, she told me one Saturday morning as we worked in my garden. This soil was completely depleted when you bought the place. Look at it now. I looked at the dark, rich earth running through my fingers. Something dead, brought back to life through patient work. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. Last week, Chloe was released on parole. She'd served 3.5 years of her 4-year sentence, with credit for good behavior. I knew because she'd found my email address somehow and sent me a message. The subject line read, "We need to talk." The email itself was long and rambling, swinging between rage and self-pity. She'd lost her graduate school acceptance. David had abandoned her. She had a criminal record that made employment nearly impossible. Our parents had depleted their retirement savings on legal fees and appeals. And somehow, all of this was my fault. You destroyed my life because you were jealous, she wrote. Asterisk, you always hated that I was prettier, smarter, more successful. You saw one chance to tear me down and you took it. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. But you had a choice and you chose to be cruel. Asterisk, I read it 3 times, waiting for some feeling to surface. Anger, guilt, satisfaction, anything. But there was just a distant recognition of who she'd always been, and who I'd finally stopped being. I crafted my response carefully. Asterisk, Chloe, you were driving while intoxicated. You hit a 62-year-old woman in the crosswalk and drove away while she lay severely injured in the street. Mrs. Albright survived, but she'll never fully recover. She had to relearn how to walk. She still has chronic pain. Her medical bills bankrupted her family's savings. Our parents asked me to go to prison for your crime. They told me I was worthless, ugly, and that my life mattered less than yours. They asked me to sacrifice my freedom so you could keep your opportunities. I chose not to. That's the extent of my crime against you. You're angry because you faced consequences for your actions. You believe you deserve special treatment because our parents spent your whole life telling you that you were exceptional. But you're not. You're just someone who made a terrible choice and had to pay for it. I hope you rebuild your life. I genuinely do. But you'll have to do it the same way I did mine. Through work, accountability, and the understanding that nobody owes you anything just because you want it. I won't be responding to future emails. I wish you well, but I'm not part of your life anymore. Asterisk, I sent it and immediately blocked her email address. Then I blocked my parents' emails, too, severing the last threads that connected us. The relief was overwhelming. 2 days ago, I received a letter via certified mail. No return address, but the postmark was from Illinois. Inside was a handwritten note from my father. Sarah, your mother is very ill. The doctors say she doesn't have much time left. She's asking for you. Whatever grievances you have with this family, she's still your mother. She raised you, fed you, gave you a home. You owe her at least a visit. Set aside your pride and do the right thing. Dad. I held the letter for a long time, sitting on my porch swing as the evening light faded from my garden. Eleanor was watering her flowers next door, humming something tuneless and cheerful. The woman who was dying was not my mother in any way that mattered. She'd stopped being that the moment she looked at me with cold calculation and decided I was expendable. The biological connection between us was just an accident of genetics, no more meaningful than sharing a blood type with a stranger. I thought about the mother I'd wanted. The one who would have protected both her daughters, who would have insisted Chloe face her consequences while still offering love and support. The one who would have seen worth in both of us. That mother had never existed. I'd finally accepted that truth. I went inside and drafted a brief response. Dad. I hope Mom gets the care she needs. I won't be visiting. Sarah. I mailed it the next morning. 3 weeks later, another certified letter arrived. I knew what it would say before I opened it. The funeral notice was brief and formal. My mother had passed away. Services would be held at the church where I'd been baptized as an infant, a building I hadn't entered in over a decade. I was listed among the survivors as if I'd been present in her life. I threw the notice in the recycling bin and went to work. Yesterday, Daniel called me into his office. I'd been working on a major security contract that could take the company to the next level. My work had been meticulous, anticipating problems before they developed and solving them with elegant efficiency. The client was impressed, Daniel said, grinning. They want you to lead the implementation team. It's a promotion. Significant raise. Your own department. We discussed the details for an hour. The position would make me one of the youngest department heads in the company. The salary was absurd. The kind of number I'd never imagined applying to my life. I accepted on the spot. Walking to my car afterward, I called Dr. Reed. She'd become a friend over the years, someone I checked in with quarterly to share progress and seek advice. I got the promotion, I told her. Her delighted laughter filled the phone. I knew you would. You've earned this 1,000 times over. I keep thinking about that first meeting in your office when you told me I had aptitude. You did. You do. She paused. I've watched a lot of students pass through my programs. Very few of them have your combination of intelligence and drive. But I've noticed something. The ones who succeed wildest are usually the ones who had something to prove. You had more to prove than most. I don't anymore, I realized, saying it out loud. I'm not trying to prove them wrong anymore. I'm just living. That's when you've really won, Dr. Reed said gently. We talked for a while longer, then said goodbye. I drove home through Denver's evening traffic, watching the city lights flicker on against the darkening sky. My phone buzzed with texts from coworkers offering congratulations. Plans for a celebration dinner were already forming. I thought about Chloe in Illinois, recently released and probably struggling to find work with her record, living with our father in the house where we'd grown up. Mom was gone now, buried 3 weeks ago without my presence. I thought about Dad, alone with the daughter he tried to save and the one he'd thrown away. And I felt nothing but a distant hope that they'd eventually find peace with their choices the same way I'd found peace with mine. My house glowed warmly as I pulled into the driveway. Eleanor waved from her porch, calling out something about bringing over zucchini bread tomorrow. Inside, my home office held the evidence of my real life, framed degrees on the wall, awards from work, photographs of colleagues who'd become friends. No family photos. I'd stopped displaying those years ago. I made dinner and worked in my garden until the light failed completely. The tomatoes were finally thriving, heavy with fruit that would ripen in the coming weeks. I'd learned patience with them, understanding that growth couldn't be forced, only supported and given time. My phone buzzed one final time. An email from an unknown address. I almost deleted it without reading, but something made me open it. Dear Miss Sarah, my name is Laura Albright. My mother was the victim of the hit and run involving your sister. I wanted to reach out because my mother asked me to contact you. She read about your sister's release in the newspaper and wanted you to know something. She wanted you to know that she forgives your sister for what happened. But more than that, she wanted me to tell you that your testimony, your honesty about what happened that night, gave her faith in people again. She'd been struggling with anger and bitterness, feeling like justice didn't exist. Learning that someone had chosen truth over family loyalty, even at great personal cost, helped her heal in ways medicine couldn't. My mother is 71 now. She still has pain and uses a cane, but she's made peace with it. She wanted you to know that your choice mattered to her, that it helped. Thank you for your integrity. Sincerely, Laura Albright. I read it twice, then a third time. Tears blurred the words, surprising me with their intensity. I hadn't cried about any of this in years. But these weren't tears of sadness or anger. They were something cleaner, something that felt almost like closure. I wrote back, Dear Laura, please tell your mother that her message means more than she could know. I hope she continues to heal. I hope she has many good years ahead. Thank you for reaching out. With gratitude, Sarah. I ended and closed my laptop. The house was quiet around me, filled with the life I built from nothing. No family legacy, no parental support, no sister's shadow to live in. Just my own work, my own choices, my own stubborn refusal to accept their version of who I was supposed to be. I walked through my home, turning off lights, locking doors, preparing for sleep. In my bedroom, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The face looking back wasn't ugly. It had never been ugly. It was just mine, lived in and earned, marked by struggles my family would never understand because they'd never bothered to see them. Tomorrow, I'd go to work and start building my new department. I'd hire people who showed potential the way Daniel and Dr. Reed had seen it in me. I'd create something worthwhile from nothing but effort and vision. My phone was silent now. No more letters from Illinois. No more guilt trips or attempts at manipulation. My mother was dead, buried without my tears. My father had Chloe back, the daughter he'd chosen. They could rebuild whatever relationship they wanted without me in the way. Eleanor's zucchini bread would arrive at some point. Work would be challenging and rewarding. My garden would need tending. My life would continue, built on foundations I'd laid myself, sustained by effort I'd chosen to make. They'd wanted me to sacrifice everything for Chloe because they decided I was worth less. Instead, I'd walked away and discovered what I was actually worth when measured by my own standards instead of theirs. The math worked out better than they'd ever imagined. I climbed into bed and slept deeply, dreamlessly, the sleep of someone who had finally stopped carrying weight that was never hers to bear. What weight have you carried that wasn't yours to bear?